I was standing in the middle of the farmer's market, and I was definitely being intentional about paying attention to what was going on. But I was paying attention to something different. I was paying attention to the relationships between the different farmers and their customers. And I was paying attention to all these conversations that were happening, and the trading and the bartering and the transactions, when I realized that all of the farmers were women. And then I had to ask myself, why am I paying attention to that?
Right.
There's got to be a reason, right? There's a reason why I'm saying, where are the men almost? Like, why are there only women here? And where are the men? What happened? And I actually went up to a farmer and I said, what's going on? Like, there's all women here today. And she said, it's interesting. Only women applied to be interns this year. And I was like, aha. There's been a tide change. Something's happening.
Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of human ingenuity, clever, inventive, and original thinking. My name is Ken Tenser, curator of Say Hi to the Future and CEO of Spiderworks, a leading business consultancy for mid-market organizations and entrepreneurs globally. With me today is Audra Mulkern, writer, photographer, and international speaker who is changing the way we look at farming and the people who grow our food. She is the founder of the Female Farmer Project, a multi-platform documentary project that chronicles the rise of women working in agriculture around the world. From in-depth stories, personal essays, photographic portraits, a podcast, and now in development, a documentary film, the project gives a powerful voice to the fastest growing demographic in agriculture, the female farmer. If you enjoy our show and what we do on Say Hi to the Future, like this video and subscribe to our channel. Leave us a comment with who you would want to see us interview next. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Okay, so Audra, I'd just like to welcome you to Say Hi to the Future today.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Great. This is it's a show about, I call it passion and savage curiosity. And I think it comes from decades of being an entrepreneur and just looking for people who are so passionate about what they do. And there's so many places to start in looking at the work you've done and your personal passions now. And I think I was listening to your TEDx talk, and right off the top, you said something so engaging. You talked about food and you talked about being in a farmer's market and how it struck you as a beautiful but temporary art gallery. And when I heard that, I said, that's passion. That's what life should really revolve around. And just tell us a little bit more about that moment and where it's taken you.
In retrospect, I come from a software background. And so when I think about that moment that I was in the market and really saw the market and saw the people, I realized that was a moment without technology. It was like this almost, panacea to all of the technology that I was surrounded with. And to be in this market and see the passion that these people brought to market every week. And it's so much work, growing it and harvesting that morning and then packing it and bringing it to market and then setting it out in this beautiful, lush display. And then so many times people picking it up and saying, $5 for this? Like, are you kidding me? Do you know what really went into that $5 bunch of carrots coming to that table? So it was just this like innate curiosity of like, why are these people doing this? Why would they go through so much effort to, sometimes just be turned down and dismissed? And so that began my curiosity, and I thought it was beautiful what they did. It really is. They were painting with vegetables. It was beautiful.
No, I understand. I mean, the color, the character, the feel, the expression, and especially you know, the passion and the love that they have for bringing what they do. And when you talk about how it can be dismissed, it almost seems to me that the challenge doesn't even start with food or farming. It starts with the relationship that we have with food, the relationship that, that's been driven by technology. In that very fast-paced world and drive through an instant gratification. And it seems that there's that sort of step before that's taken the passion out of the daily relationship that families used to have with food.
Yeah, and that's why I really feel like that panacea relationship, because it's so intimate. When you talk to the person who grew your food, that's a really interesting, intimate relationship that a lot of people don't have anymore. And we're 3 generations now removed from the farm, most of us, so many of us don't even see farms, much less go on them. We don't have that relationship to the land anymore. And it's an interesting phenomenon to see farmers markets sort of become this interesting new thing when really it's an old thing that's coming back. And it's mostly driven by women.
Well, and that was the interesting part. I mean, you go from technology to this sort of experience, if you will, to the bridge to the Female Farmer Project into women. And how did you discover that, or the lack of women, or the lack of respect, I guess, for women within farming at the time, or at the current time, I guess?
Right. Well, it was I can actually look back at the very moment that realization, that epiphany hit me. I was standing in the middle of a farmer's market and I was looking around. I had just self-published this little jewel of a book where I had photographed vegetables, and with my iPhone, I think it was a 3GX, we're on 13 now. So we're looking way back now. And it was, I kept taking pictures of vegetables, and the farmers were like, "Why are you taking pictures of my vegetables?" I'm like, "They're beautiful. There's this, I just can't get enough of it." And at some point at the end of the season, I realized that I had this collection of beautiful vegetables, but I also had this collection of conversations that I had along the way. So I went back to those farmers and I asked them if they would write essays for me. And I just self-published this little thing with the vegetables and these essays from farmers about why they come to market. Because again, that was like, why are they doing this? And it was, so successful. Everybody really, wanted a copy of this thing, and they really wanted. I think along the way I discovered there really was an appetite it wasn't just me, that a lot of people were really interested in who was growing their food, why they were doing that, and having that relationship. And so I was standing in the middle of the farmer's market, and I was definitely being intentional about paying attention to what was going on. But I was paying attention to something different. I was paying attention to the relationships between the different farmers and their customers. And I was paying attention to all these conversations that were happening, and the trading and the bartering and the transactions, when I realized that all of the farmers were women. And then I had to ask myself, why am I paying attention to that?
Right.
There's got to be a reason, right? There's a reason why I'm saying, where are the men, almost, why are there only women here? And where are the men? What happened? And I actually went up to a farmer and I said, what's going on? There's all women here today. And she said, it's interesting. Only women applied to be interns this year. And I was like, aha, there's been a tide change. Something's happening. And I need to pay attention to it. And so I decided, that was at the end of a season. So I spent the, off season going to the library. Thank goodness for libraries, right? Amazing.
Okay.
And I did so much research and requested so many books about farmers. And they kept coming back with covers of men and, on the covers. And it was started to make me mad. And I decided that I needed to start doing something about this.
Okay. So, but, and again, when you were talking about it, I mean, yes, the covers may have been of men, but, the backbone were the female farmers. And did this come out in the essays and the discussions? Like, where that must have been a great prompt for you as well, and how they were writing or expressing why they were there and the relationship they had with farming.
Yeah, I look back, and it really was sort of this unraveling and unbraiding of so much, what media was telling me, what data was telling me, because what all of that was telling me was opposite of what I was seeing in my own community. So, I'm seeing women farmers who are growing food for their community, but, quietly, making sure that these preschools in underserved communities were having access to fresh fruit and vegetables.
Right.
Those were stories that weren't being told. And that became this kind of like understanding of like, this was a history of women doing the same thing, but never really being sort of celebrated for it.
Mm-hmm. So is that what prompted the Female Farmer Project? And maybe you can tell us a little bit about it, because you talk about what it prompted you to do. So how did that start? Because it's a long way from the farmers market to, international platform now and changing farming.
And I actually had a vision that this project would be in front of people who made policy, that I was going to change their minds and really, get them to understand that who was growing their food. But then, I really didn't understand that this had, such a legs really to become an international platform. And it started out very simply that I decided I wanted to start taking pictures, but I wasn't a photographer. I didn't even own a camera, but I knew that pictures needed to be a part of it. And so a girlfriend lent me a camera. This is like, it's so kind of low tech and silly, but, she lent me this camera and she showed me how to use it. And I sat in my garden for 3 days trying to figure out how to use it and how to get pictures in focus. And then I started calling up the farmers in my community saying, can I come take pictures of you? And, you think they thought I was crazy taking pictures of the vegetables. They really thought I was crazy coming to take pictures of them. You want to take a picture of me farming? I'm like, yes, because it doesn't exist. If you go back in history and you ask for pictures of female farmers, there might be a picture of a woman standing in a field, but you don't understand that she's farming. So I needed to create what I couldn't find. And that was,
So you go from, the farmer's market to a book of pictures of vegetables. You become a photographer. You didn't own a camera. What's the next step? Like, how does that move to platform and to policy and to, again, what you've built? I mean, what were some of the steps that have made the Female Farmers Project what it is?
Well, it was a collection of acquiring tools for my tuba to become a better advocate over and over and over again.
Okay.
So, the photography was the first tool. And then I realized that I needed to tell the story a little bit better. And so I took a writing class. And, I'm not a great writer, but it's good enough to, help tell these stories. And then eventually my now dearest friend became my storytelling partner. She's a beautiful writer. And so that, was a major piece where I could focus on the photography and she could focus on the writing, and, because we were both trying to do both. And now with our partnership, we could focus and do what we did best. Then along came, a podcast, learning how to do that. And the podcast, I really think of it in terms of of oral storytelling, like this acquisition of these stories that can be, preserved for history. It's a modern storytelling, oral storytelling. And, but the pictures have always been sort of the foundation of it. And the goal ultimately is to donate all those pictures to the Library of Congress or to the Smithsonian, so that, the future generations, when they look up female farmers, there's actually pictures of them. So,
and when you present that, I mean, yeah. So you take all of those new skills that you've learned, and when you present that to policymakers, what is the reaction? Is it a positive embracement, or is it a, hey, there's vegetables, I'm all good?
Well, it was interesting because my first big invitation that scared the dickens out of me was an invitation to George Washington University to speak at this conference, Women in Agriculture. So here I am in Washington, D.C., and it's the top people who are in agriculture. We're talking about ambassadors were on the speaking program. It was a big deal. And I was scared out of my mind because I'm thinking, here I am, this photographer. Why are they inviting me? It only took me the first half of the first day to realize why they invited me. Because charts don't cut it. Line graphs, bar graphs, it doesn't cut it. You don't know why you should care by looking at a bar graph. I was bringing sort of that emotional attachment and an understanding, and I tried really hard to not make it super beautiful. I want to show the work. So that I began to understand why my work was important. And then not long ago, it was about 2017, we published a piece about farmer suicide. And we got to work with United States senators and congressmen and women on legislation. And again, I had my doubts about why I was involved. Here, we're just writers, photographers, storytellers. Why are we part of this? And they said, we need you. We need you to tell us why it's important, that the storytelling is a piece that so many people don't tell. And so that's when I really started to understand that storytelling was such a big piece of advocacy. And then I had just kind of stumbled into it by accident.
Well, I think in life, many things happen by accident, but I think the incredible thing of the accident is to be open to it, to be open to that moment when you're in the farmer's market, to be open and have the empathy to understand that, wow, something isn't quite right here. Something doesn't feel quite right. So, and now I believe you have a documentary film in development. Is that correct?
I do. And that's been my dream from the beginning, because I always felt like this was a visual medium, and that, capturing mind share has been a big piece of that. And that's one of the lessons I learned in software, that capturing mind share, changing people's minds. And you do that through visual medium. And so we are developing a documentary film. We've got some, footage already filmed of a Pennsylvania farmer who's a 10th generation farmer. And she farms land that her family bought from William Penn. So it's a really interesting historical story of this farm, where while she's 10th generation, she's 4th generation woman led in this farm. So we want to tell a few more of those stories throughout the United States. And it's a really important project to me. And we're hoping to get back to filming in the spring of 2022, because of course we had to take a couple of years off of the pandemic.
Right. Now, is this something, I see that from a press perspective. I see you were in The Guardian, which is obviously in England. I mean, this is taken on a bit of a life outside of the United States. Is that part of the documentary? Is it part of the research? Is this something that you're, if the take up is going, to Europe and beyond with Condé Nast as well, is this a story that starts to take on different chapters in different continents, or how does it explore from here?
Well, it's so interesting to me, and the reason why this stays interesting, and it's not gender, right? The least interesting thing about these women is their gender, right? The interesting thing is the intersections, where there are intersections of equity and there's intersections of technology, and and some of those intersections have come, mental health. So mental health was a big issue that we tackled in 2017, but there was a huge lead up to that. We pitched every major outlet in the United States, asking them if we could write this story. And basically we were told that nobody cares about farmers. We were, let us help. We can make them care, right? People will care if you just let us give a chance. And finally, it was The Guardian who gave us a chance. Unfortunately, it was outside of the United States. It was a British outlet that gave us the opportunity. And we're so grateful for that, because the story did become viral, and it led to huge change in legislation. We got nearly $50 million worth of funding for suicide prevention measures for farmers and farm workers in the 2018 Farm Bill. And that will always be a highlight of my career.
That's incredible. I mean, again, starting with a farmer's market, and again, as we talk about the show about passion and savage curiosity, I mean, the things that you went through, Audra, you're sharing the stories of from that day in the farmer's market to learning to take pictures, to writing, to, as you just said, a $50 million part of a bill to help, suicide prevention. And as you said too, it's not just about the female farmer project. It's really about an institution. It's about an industry. And I think it's about humanity. And, maybe not that anything, it's very hard to say anything truly great can come out of a pandemic. I mean, it's not the kind of thing that we look for greatness from, but I think that what maybe it has done is provide a little bit more empathy to who we are, as humans, and that we can see each other in that different way. Because you also were nominated for a 2019 James Beard Award. And tell us a little bit about that. I mean, tell us a little bit about the award to start, and what your subject was, because it was not specific to female farmers by any means. No,
that was a story that was on mine and my storytelling partner, Debbie Weingarten. That was one that was on our hearts, one that we knew we needed to tell, and we were so grateful to The Guardian for giving us that platform, because it really created a sea change as well. And that was the story about Black farmers and the inequities and policies that have held Black farmers back. It's worth a read for anybody who wants to understand what's happening. And it's not a feel-good story, but it's an important one. Right. And we were very grateful to the nomination from the James Beard Foundation for, that alone helped bring more light to that story. And we were very grateful the New York Times then followed up on their own and did a little bit more digging, and we're doing more storytelling about that. And it's eventually just inspired, more legislation, which is fantastic. But I think, that would be the more rewarding part. Even, being nominated for an award was, that's for a writer, for a photographer, that I would say is like, being nominated for an Academy Award, in that kind of world. But it was more rewarding to see the change that happened as a result, and continues, Yeah,
and that's incredible too. I mean, as you're talking about legislation, as you're talking about shining a light on inequity, it's amazing. Again, though, if your heart is into it, your passion is behind it, what you can actually do to change the world in very, very surprising ways.
It's true. I'm not sure I ever expected, this kind of results. And it's, half the time I think we're lucky, and half the time I think there can be nothing more rewarding than this kind of change, for a journalist or for a storyteller to have this kind of effect is amazing.
Yeah. And now you're participating in something that sort of brings all of your backgrounds together, tech and food and your passions. Refresh Food and Tech. Tell us a little bit about that and how that involvement happened.
Well, we've, sort of taken a break during the pandemic. We were meeting in person, and we tried to do a few sort of calls to keep it rolling, but it is difficult. But we do have, it's an organization of people from the food system, all throughout the food system, nonprofit, grocery stores, agriculture, you name it, anything in the food system, they are represented, tech, everything. And we sort of settled on about 5 policy platforms. And my cohort, the one that I lead, that I'm most passionate about, amongst all of those policy ideas, is rural broadband expansion.
Okay.
I feel like we can't go any further with tech or do any of those things until we close that digital divide. I think it's the most important thing we can do. 25% of the United States in rural communities do not have access to broadband, and that's crazy to me. This is this isn't
Right.
a problem to fix. It can be done, right?
And how does that tie back to food and food tech?
Well, the digital divide affects business, right? So farmers don't have access to their customers,
Right.
right? If you're trying to sell something on a market, you can't access that market.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have access to telemedicine, your
Right.
being is at risk. If you don't have access to education, that is a huge thing, huge thing, from children to adults. If, there's the digital divide, we're leaving people behind. And the people we're leaving behind are, in rural communities, and they tend to be in agriculture and the food system. So advocating for thoughtful answers and policies that are data-driven and innovative, engaging and empowering those people in those communities and in the food system to advocate for themselves. I think there's such a huge opportunity for expanding broadband, for creating this digital workforce. That's the future. There's, and then there's ag tech. There's a lot of tech that could be very useful to farmers if they had access to broadband. There's the Fitbits for cows, that cows wear, and it, pumps the information back to the farmer about what's going on with the cows. That kind of data they don't have access to because of the broadband problem.
Right. Well, that's, and you said, who else is involved in that? Because you said it was 1 of 5. I mean, it sounds like a pretty major undertaking.
It is, yeah. There's probably, I'd say, about 50 of us in on the thing. So there's a lot of, and I will be happy to share some links too for you to include, that where people can read about the platform and what we're working towards and what our goals are. And really, it's about education and empowerment, educating the people who create policy, empowering the people to advocate for better policy and thoughtful policy, because really, policymakers are so far removed from agriculture, just like the rest of us.
No, it sounds like a wonderful undertaking. Yes, we look forward to sharing that and many other of the links to the stories you've done. And as we wrap up, there's one thing that you say, and it's about changing the way that we look at farming and the food on our plates. What do we want to leave people with today? How do we want to look at the food on our plates, and what do we want to see?
Well, I think for a long time, farming has almost been looked down upon. There's that, if you close your eyes and you think farmer, you think a man, you tend to think of, like the ratty hat, hay in there between their teeth. It's that hayseed sort of perception of agriculture when, this is a very STEM heavy job. There's a lot of science and technology and engineering and math and even art that has to go into agriculture. There are very, very educated people on the farm. There was a point where I thought I was meeting more PhDs on the farm than in academia. Like, this is a very well-educated populace, but we don't treat them that way. We don't think of them in that way. We don't think of them as business owners, of entrepreneurs, of landowners. My own small town, which is a farming community, the mayor hosted a roundtable with the local news, and they invited all of these Main Street businesses, and not a single farmer was included in the table. And I thought, why don't we think about farmers as the economic engine of some of these communities? Because they really are.
Well, they're the economic engine, and they touch all of our lives multiple times a day. So absolutely critical. So Audra Mulkern, Female Farmer Project, thank you so much for walking into that farmer's market that day and recognizing what you did, and for all the policy changes and all the impact that you're having. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you, Ken. It was just a really special pleasure for me to be here and to chat with you. It was a really great conversation.
Take care.
Thanks, Ken.